Imagine standing on the dusty plains outside the city of Delhi in December 1398. Across the field, the horizon is dominated by a sight that has broken the spirit of every army that ever faced it. A wall of 120 war elephants. These aren't just animals. They are the living tanks of the Tughlaq dynasty, draped in heavy steel chainmail, their foreheads protected by ornate bronze plates, and their tusks fitted with razor-sharp blades dipped in poison. To the soldiers of Timur, these giants look like gods of war. But today, we unlock the story of how one of history's most ruthless conquerors used a horrifyingly brilliant trick to turn these monsters into the Sultan's own executioners. Welcome to Time Unlocked. The elephant. Menachedo. Understand the terror of the elephant, you have to understand the medieval battlefield. In the 14th century, war elephants were the ultimate psychological weapon. They were trained to ignore the screams of dying men, the clashing of swords, and the sting of arrows. They didn't just walk, they crushed. A single charge from 100 elephants could pulverize thousands of infantrymen in minutes. Timur, often known as Tamerlane, was a genius of war, but even he knew his legendary Mongol Turkic cavalry was terrifying. Horses have a natural, deep-seated fear of elephants. They refuse to charge them, and if an elephant trumpets, a horse will often throw its rider and flee in a blind panic. Timur's generals advised him to retreat. The Sultan of Delhi, Mahmud Khan, was so confident in his Grey Mountains that he invited Timur to the gates of his city, believing the battle was already won. The invention of Chausput Timur was a man who saw a problem and engineered a nightmare to solve it. He realized that for all their training, elephants were still animals, and animals have one fear that no training can ever truly erase: the fear of fire. He ordered his men to gather every camel in his massive baggage train, hundreds of them, while the Sultan's army watched from their fortifications, curious about why the conqueror was grouping his pack animals at the front. Timur's engineers were busy. They loaded the camels' backs with enormous piles of dry hay, straw, and wood, and then soaked the entire load in flammable naphtha and oils. The stampede of fires, the sun hit its peak. The Sultan gave the order. The 120 elephants began their slow, thunderous advance. The ground shook. The bells hanging from their armor clanged with a rhythmic, terrifying sound. Timur waited. He waited until the elephants were close enough to feel the vibration in his own boots. Then, he gave the signal that changed history. Light them. In an instant, the front line of Timur's army became a wall of roaring flame. The camels, in absolute agony and terror, were whipped into a frantic stampede directly toward the oncoming elephants. It was a sensory overload of the most horrific kind. The elephants were suddenly faced with hundreds of screaming, flaming creatures running straight at them. The smell of burning hair and the intense heat triggered an ancient, primitive survival instinct. The collapse of Delhi. Elephants didn't just stop, they bolted. The giants turned around in a blind panic, ignoring the desperate hooks of their mahouts. They charged backward into their own lines, trampling the Sultan's elite infantry and crushing his cavalry into the dirt. The very weapons that were supposed to save Delhi were now the instruments of its destruction. Timur didn't lose a second. Seeing the Sultan's formations in total disarray, he ordered his fresh cavalry to charge into the carnage. The battle, which many thought would be a slaughter of Timur's men, was over in hours. Delhi, one of the wealthiest and most beautiful cities in the world, was left wide open and defenseless. What followed was a massacre so brutal, it is still remembered in the history of the Indian subcontinent as a moment of total darkness. Timur didn't win the Battle of Delhi because he had more soldiers or better armor. He won because he understood the anatomy of fear. He took a biological weakness and weaponized it with ruthless efficiency. He proved that no matter how much steel you wrap around an army, if you can break their mind, you have already won the war. Thank you for joining us as we unlock the fire that brought down an empire. If you believe that strategy is the ultimate weapon of history, subscribe to Time Unlocked and share this video to help us keep these stories alive. How would you have defended against a stampede of fire? Let us know in the comments below.